Sri Lanka's most powerful news brand.
All right, fantastic. Good evening. I'm here with Zulfiq Farzan and Faraz Shauktali. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. Good evening.
Now, today saw the release of the report compiled by the Presidential Commission of Inquiry to investigate and look into the Treasury bonds. It's over 1,000 pages. Before delving deep into the recommendations, the findings of the report, and of how financial fraud is handled in Sri Lanka, let's take a look at an instance where financial fraud was handled in a completely different way, this time in the Czech Republic. Here, the Czech government, led by Prime Minister Andrej Babis, agreed to resign today after the minority cabinet lost a confidence vote on Tuesday. Here's a look.
The government will remain in office in a caretaker capacity after the compulsory step, pending negotiations on forming an alternative administration that could take weeks or months as parties shun Babis, while he battles allegations he abused an EU subsidy program a decade ago as a businessman. Babis said, and I quote, "The government approved its resignation and I will ask for an appointment with the president so that I can deal with the resignation personally," unquote. President Miloš Zeman has said he will give Babis another go at forming a government. The president's spokesperson said Zeman would accept the resignation by the end of the working week. Police allege Babis, the country's second richest person, hid ownership of one of his companies a decade ago to win a €2 million subsidy, mostly from European Union funds meant for small businesses. He denies wrongdoing. He was charged in the case but regained immunity from prosecution when he won a lower house seat in an October general election in which his ANO party was the winner by a wide margin but failed to reach a majority. Parliament will decide whether to lift Babis' immunity on Friday.
Right. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the bulletin, today saw the release of the report issued by the Presidential Commission of Inquiry to look into, investigate into the Treasury bond scam, massive fraud perpetrated against the public of Sri Lanka. Now, Zulfiq, you have been constantly, consistently monitoring all the developments, all the revelations for hours on end that transpired at the Commission. Zulfiq, let's take our viewers as well as our listeners on Yes FM through some of the main allegations that have been leveled at certain individuals and certain groups.
Right, Sonali, this evening the entire report was published on the website of the Presidential Secretariat.
That's right.
Now, this report comprises of more than 1,400 pages. That's excluding the annexures, which could go into more thousands and thousands of pages. Now, we actually had a very deep look into the executive summary of this report and also the recommendations of this. We must emphasize that that is the executive summary that we actually had a look into before delving into the 1,400 pages. Now, in this report, or the executive summary, there is one part which says that the Prime Minister had in fact only given former Central Bank Governor Agama Today a rather vague instruction of, can you consider moving into a different system or going into auction system. Now, however, for us, you might remember that when Agama Today was testifying before the Presidential Commission of Inquiry, he in fact said that he got the instructions from the Prime Minister himself to do a change in the system.
And also, Zulfiq, if we remember, this is precisely what Agama Today said at COP 1 and COP 2.
So there are discrepancies, is it?
Yes,
there
indeed.
are inconsistencies.
There are inconsistencies,
right.
Because, Sonali, whilst we have the Commission report saying that the Prime Minister had only instructed Mahendran to consider change, the Prime Minister in Parliament on the 17th of March, 9 days after Newsfirst first started reporting on this scandal, the Prime Minister said, "I instructed the governor to have a change of the system, he called it private placements, because he said there was a lot of corruption."
I think we can have a listen to what the Prime Minister said on that day.
Let's take a listen then.
I insisted on a public auction because private placements have led to corruption and lack of transparency. Previously, parcels of government bonds were handed out to selected individuals on a favoured basis through a system of private placement. It took place outside the normal auctions of government bonds.
Right,
Now,
that was...
there you are. That was the Prime Minister
yes.
on the 17th of March, and very clearly he says that he instructed that change.
Right.
And therefore, there's an odd... he says that, but in the Commission report, it says that he merely instructed the governor to consider a change.
So a marked inconsistency
absolutely.
there. Now, we have to speak about the massive role played by the media, the vibrant role played by the media in unearthing this massive financial fraud. Otherwise, Faraz and Zulfiq, this would have just gone under the rug.
Absolutely, Sonali, and I dare say that we would have still had the same governor at the central bank, Mr. Mahendran.
Right. We also have to talk about the role of the Presidential Commission of Inquiry in that the revelations and the findings, the recommendations that came through the Presidential Commission of Inquiry
was far more intense than both the COPE 1 and 2.
Right.
The
so
level
we
of
saw
detail.
the manner in which bigwigs were being summoned before the Commission of Inquiry.
By bigwigs, you mean the Prime Minister himself, former Minister Ravi Karunanayake, General Secretary of the UNP and Minister Kabir Hashim, and Chairman of the UNP and Minister Malik Samarawickrama.
And several others.
Corporate heads as well.
That's right, and
Indeed.
several others. And Zulfiq has sat through these proceedings every time they sat for 11 months.
Yes.
And Zulfiq has got a stack of notebooks, which you've made, I think it's 13 notebooks.
13 notebooks.
13 notebooks, and it's marked for its clarity and the way he's printed it all out. So he was there,
Right.
and he knows how the questioning went.
Zulfiq, my next question. Now, when we go through the executive summary and the recommendations of the Presidential Commission of Inquiry, we see indications of financial fraud, insider trading, collusion, possible bribery. Can you take us through some of these?
Yes, Sonali. Now, if you take in the point of inside trading, now the Commission has said that it is recommending that action needs to be taken against this primary dealer called Perpetual Treasuries Limited, because it has found that Perpetual Treasuries Limited in fact was involved in insider trading and also market manipulation. And speaking of the 27th of January 2015, the first controversial bond auction. February 2015, the first controversial bond auction. The Commission has found that Agama Mahendran's decision to interfere with this auction caused an avoidable loss of 688 million rupees to the government. And the Commission says that Agama Mahendran is responsible for this loss and should be held accountable. In addition to that, the Commission also says that paving the way and also changing the system, Agama Mahendran had colluded with Perpetual Treasuries, enabling Perpetual Treasuries Limited to gain a benefit from that auction.
Right. Now,
Sorry,
yes, Farah.
it's 688 million, and the fine is the same again.
If found guilty before a
That's
magistrate
right.
court,
That's right.
the fine would amount to
That same
that
amount
or
again.
double. Right. Now, let's take a look at some of the statements made by the head of state, President Maithripala Sirisena, who spoke very strongly about this biggest financial fraud perpetrated on the country.
The biggest robbery in the history of this country is the central bank robbery. I appointed a presidential commission to investigate this scam. When the proceedings of the commission commenced, it was an eye-opener. You are aware that the report of the commission was handed over to me. I came before you today after initiating operation at 2 this afternoon. I summoned the Attorney General, the Director of the Bribery Commission and the Governor of the Central Bank to my office this afternoon. I also summoned legal experts working in the state service. I had a meeting with all of them today. I inquired from them how long they would require the legal proceedings in order to take action against the rogues and to recover the people's money which has been lost in this scam. I asked them how long they would need to complete legal proceedings. I came for this meeting today following discussions and ensuring that a mechanism is in place to punish the rogues, to imprison the rogues and to recover the billions of rupees which belong to the people. I must clearly state that Operation 2 has been initiated. We have formulated 3 new acts. These acts will ensure that such scams are not committed in the future in the central bank. If the money that was lost due to the scam is to be recovered from the rogues under the existing law, it will take around 10 to 15 years. Therefore, we are formulating a new act that will enable the money to be taken from the bank accounts of these rogues expeditiously. The relevant regulations should be formulated to ensure that such frauds and corruptions do not reoccur in the central bank in the future. I reiterate that the amendments to the Bribery and Corruption Act has concluded.
මේ වන විටත් වැඩ කටයුතු අවසන් කියන එක මම තමුන්නාන්සලාට ඉතාම පැහැදිලිව මම මතක් කරන්නට වෙනවා.
Rather strong words by the head of state there.
Indeed.
Now, let's talk a bit about the manner in which this financial fraud was perpetrated. Now, see, the appointing of former governor of the central bank, Arjun Mahendran, it vests in the Prime Minister of the country.
Well, the minister in charge of the subject of the central bank,
which is the Prime Minister,
was for the first time also the Prime Minister. Well, the first time because it's the first time that the finance ministry was split into three.
Now, Faraz, the commission report in its executive summary and recommendations says that there was a wrong value judgment made in this appointing of someone like this.
Yes, because we must bear in mind that Arjun Mahendran was a Singaporean national, and it was pointed out that he didn't, for example, take the oath that all public officials take in this country. And so there was nothing illegal about it, but
Correct.
It was a value judgment that the commissioners spoke about.
Right, so if the value judgment had been different, Sri Lanka wouldn't have been dealing with this right now, no?
Arguably so.
Right. Zulfiq, now we've seen the manner in which there's been a lot of delays in the system. For example, even if we take the audit bill, for example, right? Audit bill has seen amendments, dilutions being made.
And the 24th amendment just took place recently.
Now, recently, former Minister Ravi Karunanayake also spoke to the media. Let's see what he has to say.
ඔබතුමා ඉල්ලීමක් කරා ජනාධිපති ලේකම් කරා තොරතුරු දැනගැනීමේ පනත අනුව බැඳුම්බර සම්බන්ධ වෙන වාර්තාව ඔබතුමාට ලබා දෙන්න කියලා. ඒ වුණාට අගමැතිවරයාට ඒ වාර්තාව ලැබිලා තියෙනවා. ඒ මොකද ඔබතුමාට ලැබෙන්නේ නැතුව අගමැතිතුමාට ලැබිලා තිබිච්ච.
Who said that I did not receive the report? Do I have to publicly announce that I have the report? We have got it. When the Prime Minister gets it, we also get it. We now know why the government doesn't put this out in the open. Because it is a massive fraud, they don't publish this to the public. Otherwise, what other problems do they have? Why don't they reveal everything?
ජනාධිපතිවරයා කියනවා පික්පොකට් ගහලා මිනිස්සේ මොරා දුවනවා කියලා කෑ ගහනවා කියලා. මේක ඔබතුමාට අරපු ඉන්ටැක්ද? මං හිතන්නේ
I don't think the president will do such cheap things. What you think is not what he thinks. Maybe it was a hint to the Rajapaksas. Everyone saw how they behaved in parliament. What of the behavior of the Prime Minister? The Prime Minister made a statement and the Rajapaksas didn't let him read. So what is the issue here?
Well, quite a lot of melodrama surrounding the bond scam, Faraz and Zulfiq. Now, what we need to stress to the general public as well is the fact that just because the report is now out doesn't seem relevant unless these are made into actionable points, because the Commission has recommended action be taken in civil courts, in criminal courts, right? So these have to be done, but we've been seeing constant delays in the system of justice. The implementation mechanism, let's talk a bit about that.
That's exactly the implementation mechanism. When we also have to be aware that the recovery process isn't just the only thing. The rules have been broken. There are recommendations elsewhere in the report about the penal code, action under the penal code, and so on. So we really must see some action now.
Right, Zulfiq, the recommendations now have to be actionable.
Indeed.
What are your thoughts on this?
Well, Sonali, we went to the recommendations and we found out a key important points where, like Fuaz said, some recommendations are that if found guilty, action has to be taken under certain sections of the penal code, especially when it comes to the attempt to suppress evidence by Perpetual Treasuries Limited regarding the attempt to delete telephone conversations, and also where the Commission says it is determined now that Kasun Parisena, the Chief Executive Officer of Perpetual Treasuries Limited, had not given the proper information regarding the recordings at Perpetual Treasuries Limited. And in fact, even in that point, the Commission has recommended that if he is found guilty, that action must be taken against him under the Penal Code. And however, there's one point that caught my eye, and it's really interesting, that they're asking the relevant authorities to consider if action needs to be taken against 2 employees at PTL because they turned state witnesses, and they were the whistleblowers who exposed that there was an attempt to delete the phone calls at PTL.
There's also a recommendation about looking into the possibility of possible bribery, right?
Indeed. That comes relating to the former Finance Minister, Agama Today, where a recommendation has been made to find out whether he derived a certain massive benefit from the lease payment by Walt & Rowe Associates. Now, Walt & Rowe Associates is an associate company of Perpetual Treasuries Limited. Now, this lease was paid to a massive apartment located in the heart of Colombo.
Right. Now,
and may I just add here that the recommendations of potential action under the Bribery Act is not limited only to Mr. Karunaika. There is also suggestion elsewhere that the Bribery Commission looks into the actions of Mr. Mahendran as well.
Right.
Indeed.
Now, this report was also tabled in Parliament today. Let's take a look at what Speaker Karu Jayasuriya had to say. It's rather interesting.
We spoke to the leader of the House as well as the leader of the opposition and decided to convene a party leaders meeting on Monday, the 22nd at 9:30 in the morning. The future course of action will be decided there. An agenda will be created. When will this matter be taken up for debate? It cannot be decided by me. We will take action once the party leaders provide their opinion.
Right. Now, the General Secretary of the UNP, Kabir Hashim, says that a 3-member committee will be appointed to study the Bond Commission report. Let's take a look at his remarks and then resume the conversation.
If there's an allegation that Perpetual Treasuries earned an illegal profit of 1 billion, then you need to keep in mind that last year the Prime Minister intervened and gave orders to freeze their assets. Currently, there is 12 billion in their frozen accounts. If they did something illegal, then we can take back this money to the government. Reliable sources have informed me that there are recommendations to this extent in the Bond Commission report. When we receive this report, we will be appointing a 3-member committee following discussions with the leader of our party to further study this report. If there is someone involved in this, we will take stern action against those persons. The UMP will not falter in taking action against them.
Now, this evening we were informed that the 3-member committee will comprise of Tilak Marapana. Faraz, your thoughts on this?
Well, 2 years ago, we must remember that Tilak Marapana was forced to resign from his post as a minister because of his links to avant-garde. And there was a clear conflict of interest over there. And today, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was in Horana on a sudden visit to the tyre factory of which the investor Nandana Lokuvitana, a controversial individual with deep ties to the former government.
Right, so this topic of conflict of interest keeps rearing its head like a ubiquitous animal almost.
Indeed.
Right. Now, Zulfikar, another factor that was discussed was that of insider trading. Insider trading.
Indeed.
What exactly were the points in the report?
Well, Sonali, in the report it says that Perpetual Treasuries Limited had connections with certain institutions where they had, colluded, like I mentioned before, that Arjun Mahendran colluded with Perpetual Treasuries on the 27th of February 2015 bond auction. Now, however, at the Commission itself, evidence came out that this is not just market manipulation. See, Perpetual Treasuries Limited, according to the evidence that was led before the Commission, had actually purchased bonds from the market and then pumped the prices up to other means, and then finally dumped, in their own words, dumped it on the Employees Provident Fund. Now, the Employees Provident Fund, the largest fund in the entire region, is filled with yours and mine hard-earned money. Now, in addition to that, this network, how they built it, was also exposed by the Attorney General's Department during the hearings of the Commission, where they said it was like a network of a beehive, where Perpetual Treasuries Limited had individuals placed in different institutions, and then where they discuss all the arrangements of the bond transactions, and that is how they had entered into those bond transactions in a very deceptive manner under the guise of this certain beehive that they have established. To prove one claim, they showed that an informant, only by the code name of Charlie, during a period of 1 year was paid almost 100 million rupees in bribes. And then that included several others as well from different institutions, including the Employees Trust Fund and the Employees Provident Fund.
So these are revelations that were revealed in the during the Commission proceedings, right?
Yes, what they showed was that it was a pattern in trading that was designed to mask the real beneficiary. So according to the evidence that was led at the Commission, the real beneficiary goes much more higher. It's not just limited to one party.
Right. Now, for us, we see corruption, large-scale fraud, large-scale corruption, white-collar crime. Day in, day out, we are also in office talking about this, disseminating information to the public.
Exactly.
Right? Now, we saw the manner in which the head of state, President Maithripala Sirisena, expressed his disgust.
Utter contempt for corruption.
Absolutely. So yesterday the President made a very strong statement at the cabinet meeting about how he risked his entire family to contest at the 2015 presidential election. Now, State Minister Lakshmana Abewardena elaborated on what the President actually said.
President Maithripala Sirisena won as a common candidate. When he came into power, he said he will rid the country of fraud and corruption, ensure freedom of the public and bring back respect to civil society. This is what he had expressed in cabinet yesterday. He had reiterated this is the reason he had come out of one place to contest. He had asked whether he can remain in power without fulfilling his promises. Why have they gotten so hurt because of these things? No one need to put this cap on themselves. If there is anyone who continues to come out to express views on these issues, then as SLFP, we will not back down from protecting the President. Who are these amateur politicians who are slinging mud? Some of the people who are making these charges are first-term parliamentarians. They might not know about the history of Parliament. They don't know if they can win by challenging a party leader.
Criticism against the President has been mounting. Here's what State Minister Ranjan Ramanayake had to say.
People from our own party are insulting the President. They did not say this before the 8th of January 2015. What did they say back then? They called him the savior. They called him the liberator. That is what he was called back then. No one had the backbone to come out against the murderer, the thug back then. Who took that risk? It was Maithripala Sirisena, the Honourable President. You cannot forget the past and exploit a person and be ungrateful thereafter. This is the bitter truth spoken by Ranjan Ramanayake. If there were bond thieves in our party, I am a person who spoke about that as well. If John Amaratunga broke down walking paths, I spoke about that as well. What are these two individuals doing? They are trying to protect their party. They are carrying out party politics. I am asking both of them to do politics for the people. Do not treat the rogues in the party in one way and treat the other rogues in another. Appoint commissions and punish all the rogues. What will happen through this quarrel is that the former thug will emerge. This is empowering him again. One can suspect as to whether this is a conspiracy of the former President Mahinda Rajapaksa to divide these two people. During the hard times, President Maithripala Sirisena came forward and rescued us. Be grateful for that. It seems that our party is not grateful. Janak Pereira in Sabaragamu sacrificed his life for us. He is not remembered. We have made a lot of sacrifices for the party, but if there is a small issue, even the electorate is removed from us. Things like that happen. A main thing a party must have is gratefulness. I have to ask the members of the party not to attack the person who came to our aid during hard times.
Several newspaper headlines today carried the news that the President had stormed out of the cabinet meeting yesterday and had to be sort of calmed down and then brought back in. So, a lot of criticism taking place against the head of state. And now today the UNP working committee met and some decisions had been taken following yesterday's conduct. Let's have a quick listen to what Minister Navin Disanayake and MP SM Marika had to say after the meeting.
The Prime Minister, as the leader of our party, advised the members not to level allegations against the President. With regard to the Bond Commission, the public will have the report tomorrow. We also have discussed on this and our political stance. The Prime Minister strongly advised the young MPs not to level allegations against the President.
කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයේදී ජනාධිපතිවරයාව විවේචනය කිරීම සම්බන්ධයෙන් ආණ්ඩුව විවේචනය කරන්න එපා කියලා මේදී උපදෙස් ලැබුණාද පුතුමා?
නෑ අපි ජනාධිපතිතුමා විවේචනය
We have never criticized the president. We have said we snuck into Mahinda Rajapaksa's pocket and campaigned for the president. We have never criticized the president that we appointed. The president is ours, no one else's.
අපි විවේචනය කරලා නෑ ජනාධිපතිතුමා අපේනේ වෙන කාගේවත් නෙමෙයිනේ.
Although the parliamentarian expressed these views today, this is what he said a few days ago.
අවුරුදු 6කට ජනාධිපතිකම
Today, Maithripala Sirisena is trying to see if he can stay in power for 6 years. When he was contesting, he said, give me power for 5 years. He said he will get rid of his powers within 100 days. Now he wants to stay in power for 6 years. In a similar fashion, Mahinda Rajapaksa tried to see if he could stay in power for 3 terms. He came into power asking for 5 years, now he wants 6. We don't know about the law, but the people can reach a decision on him.
There is a limit to lying. Be careful of such politicians.
Faraz, your thoughts?
Well, very unfortunately and sadly to say, Mr. Marika was a journalist, and his outburst is absolutely unacceptable and is not in keeping with the expectations of the people when it comes to a legislator.
Yeah, so on the same note, Faraz, here's a state minister Sujiva Senasinghe making a statement.
Keep this in your mind. The UNP did not start its thuggery yet. We are ready for any game. You might remember the 70s and the 80s. We're ready for the hook or for the crook. Sujiva Senasinghe and Sarath Fonseca are good thugs.
Faraz, we keep talking about a vibrant media. We keep talking about media freedom, freedom of expression. These are the ideals that we believe in. These are ideals that are enshrined in the Constitution. Freedom of expression is enshrined in the Constitution as a fundamental right.
Absolutely.
Now, what is this intimidation?
Sonali, what we need to realize is that right from the 8th of March, 2015, when we first started reporting on the subject following an article that appeared in the Sunday papers, we have maintained the one line: conflict of interest and a departure from process. Every time, each and every report that comes through these to our offices here will and can stand up to legal scrutiny. There's no two words about it. The media has been very strong, and if it was not for the media, none of this would have come out on top. Now, Sonali, when we see this, when we read the executive summary of the Commission report, it appears that they are trying to hang Ravi Karunanayake and Rajina Mahendran.
So are they the fall guys?
They appear to be so, because you see these people and several others involved in this scam simply didn't act on their own. It would be foolish for us to think that, and there's one thing that the public in Sri Lanka are not, and that is they are not foolish. And this scam goes far, far higher than what it appears. They're just trying to hang 2 guys and think that everything will be fine, but actually there are people involved who are higher than Ravi Karunanayake or Mr. Mahendran.
Zulfiq, your thoughts?
Sonali, I would like to add something that we did not come across in the executive summary of this report. That is, I've been at the Presidential Commission for almost 10 months, sitting in there every day from morning till late afternoon and coming back here and reporting to you, the viewers, on what exactly happens at the Presidential Commission. Now, the Attorney General's Department at one occasion said, I did not find these words in the Commission executive summary, but they said that this is not just a spontaneous incident. It did not just happen. The Attorney General said, the department said, actually those officers who came forward to investigate, they said that this was in fact a pre-planned and determined and well-orchestrated scam.
Indeed. It had, if we were talking about murder, it was murder in the first degree because it was premeditated. Everything about this scam suggests that that is what actually happened. It was a well-orchestrated scam that the Attorney General's Department described as the greatest financial fraud ever to be inflicted on the people of Sri Lanka. And the biggest loser out of all this, as we can now see, has been the EPF. And that is the monies of the hard-working, tax-paying people's monies. Yours, Zulfik, and everybody out there. And it is absolutely disgraceful that, you know, and as we go through this, and we've been following this since 2015, all the lies that has been said in the past is now being systematically dismantled, because at the end of the day, Sonali, as you know, the truth will always prevail.
Right. Faraz, on that note, let's take a look at what MP Mahindananda Alutgama had to say.
These attacks are carried out based on instructions the backbenchers receive from the top brass of the party. The backbenchers will not launch such attacks without instructions to do so. The President retaliated at the cabinet meeting. We have received reports to say that the Prime Minister, together with the backbenchers, went and cried and settled the matter.
Right, interesting statements there. Now, finally, Zulfik and Faraz, we need to also talk about some of the other facts brought out by the Commission report. One, the initial committee that was appointed to look into this, the Pitipana report, committee, right? Now, the Commission report says this Pitipana committee didn't really have the technical knowledge or know-how.
That's right.
Because this central bank bond, treasury bond process, it's a very highly technical
and so now it's a very, very complex process.
Correct.
Because when you take into account government securities, it's not just buying a bond. There's a huge process behind it, how the payments are made. So that's why it took almost 10 months for them to understand actually what went wrong at the central bank.
Right, gentlemen, we are running out of time. So thank you so much for your contributions right throughout.
Do I have a few seconds?
We need to go in for a short commercial break and we'll be right back.